The exile begins. The sound of the airlock doors, sealing echoed through the vast, empty chamber. Earth's leaders stood in silence, facing the towering alien council. The council's judgment was final. The humans had been deemed unworthy, their aggressive tendencies too dangerous to the stability of the galaxy, and now the humans were to be exiled. The council's decision was made, and there was no turning back. Your species is a threat to galactic peace. You will be cast out. The lead alien, a cold, unfeeling being of the Saurian Empire, declared in a voice that sent chills down the spines of those present. Your homeworld will no longer be part of our federation. You are to leave the galaxy forever. The room fell into an eerie silence. Earth's representatives stood frozen, helpless, against the overwhelming power of the council. They knew they were beaten, but the gravity of the situation hadn't fully hit them. Yet they had just been abandoned by their supposed allies. Their entire civilization condemned. This was the end, or so they thought. The humans were loaded onto ships and cast away from the heart of the galaxy, their destination, a remote, uncharted planet at the farthest reaches of space. The alien ships shot through the void of space, leaving Earth behind as nothing more than a memory, a distant, irrelevant speck in the vast expanse. For humanity, the future seemed uncertain, bleak, and full of nothing but the void. As the humans looked out the windows of their exile vessels, they could see the stars twinkling in the distance, but it didn't bring them hope. It reminded them of what they had lost: home, family, friends, and the worst of all, the freedom to explore, to grow, to exist in the vastness of the galaxy. The aliens had stripped them of everything, but then the human spirit kicked in, the thing that the aliens had never understood. While others hung their heads in despair, a small group of humans refused to accept this fate. They had always known the worst of times often brought out the best in humanity. This was just another challenge, another battle. To win it would not break them, it would make them stronger. As the ships approached the planet, the humans had little idea of what to expect. All they knew was that they were heading for a place that had never been explored, a barren world, untouched by any species. The planet was harsh, filled with towering mountains and deep, unforgiving valleys. There was no atmosphere to speak of, no welcoming signs of life. The only sounds were the hum of the engines and the whispers of fear among the crew. Yet in the face of this unknown, some humans felt something else, a spark of curiosity, a glimmer of hope. Settle down, everyone, Captain Harper said, her voice calm but firm. This is not the end. We are not the kind of people who give up. We survive, we adapt, and we thrive. This is where we start over. Her words stirred something deep within the crew. They had been stripped of everything they knew, but they still had their determination, their strength, and their will to survive. It was all they needed. The ships landed on the barren world with a thud, sending clouds of dust and debris into the air. The humans stepped out onto the cold alien soil. They scanned the environment. The air was thin, the sky a dull gray. There were no signs of life, no plants, no animals. The landscape stretched endlessly in every direction, a vast desert that seemed to offer nothing. This is it, Lieutenant Carl said, glancing around. Our new home, not much to look at. We'll make it work, Captain Harper replied. We'll figure this out together. As the humans set up their camp, a sense of unease filled the air. They were stranded on a foreign planet with limited resources and no hope of immediate rescue. The planet was hostile, offering no shelter from the cold nights and no warmth under the scorching days. But in their hearts they knew this was not the end, not for them. By the time the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain, the humans had started to build a small settlement. It wasn't much, a few tents, some makeshift shelters, and a supply depot, but it was something. They had taken the first step. In the long road ahead, they had landed on an alien world, exiled from the galaxy. But they would not be defeated. As night fell, Captain Harper stood at the edge of the camp, looking out over the barren landscape. The stars shone brightly overhead, and for a moment it almost felt like home again. But she knew that their fight was just beginning. They were exiles, yes, but they were still humans. And humans didn't give up. The aliens had thought they could break humanity, thought they could send them to the farthest reaches of space and leave them to die. But what they didn't understand was that humanity had faced much worse before. This was not the end. This was just the beginning. Tomorrow, The real fight would begin. They would learn this planet, they would adapt, they would survive, and soon the galaxy would hear from them again. The humans were cast out, but they would not just survive, they would thrive. And no one, not even the aliens who had exiled them, could have ever imagined what would happen next. The struggle to survive the barren planet stretched endlessly before them. What had seemed like a small setback was quickly proving to be a deadly challenge. No one had prepared for a world so hostile, so unforgiving. The first days were the hardest. The humans, though resilient, found themselves overwhelmed by the harsh environment. As the survivors struggled to adapt, their bodies weakened under the relentless sun. The temperature would scorch them during the day, and at night the cold would seep into their bones, freezing them in place. The lack of resources only added to their despair. They couldn't grow food, the water was scarce, and they had no tools to hunt or build shelter. "How are we supposed to live here?" Lieutenant Carl asked one evening, his voice low with exhaustion. He stood by the campfire, gazing out into the vast, empty desert. The stars overhead felt like distant mockery. "We're not giving up," Captain Harper replied firmly, though she too was struggling to hold on to her own sense of hope. The reality of their situation had sunk in. The world was empty, but it wasn't completely devoid of promise. Somewhere beneath the dust and rock, there had to be something. Days turned into weeks, and the crew's efforts to survive seemed futile, but something in their spirit refused to break. Captain Harper was determined, pushing herself and her team harder every day. There was a sense of urgency now. The planet may have been barren on the surface, but there was one thing she knew: the Saurian Empire had sent them here for a reason. They hadn't been cast out to simply die. One morning, as the sun rose with its blinding rays, something caught Lieutenant Carl's eye. Far off in the distance beyond the horizon, a faint glimmer of light reflected off something metallic. At first, he thought it was a mirage, just the heat playing tricks on his vision. But he wasn't the only one who saw it. "Captain," he shouted, rushing toward her, "I think I found something. It's not much, but it's something, Captain." Harper's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't the first time they had seen a glimmer of hope, but this time felt different. She grabbed her gear, and without a word she and her team set off toward the distant glow. The journey was long, each step feeling heavier than the last. The land was cruel: rocky hills, deep ravines, and scorching winds that seemed to sap the last bit of their energy. By the time they reached the source of the light, their hope was waning. But then, as they rounded a bend, they saw it. Hidden beneath layers of dust and dirt was an ancient structure. It was buried deep in the ground, as if the planet had been trying to keep its secret from them. A massive metallic door stood half open, a strange energy field humming faintly around it. "Is this Lieutenant Carl?" whispered his voice, barely audible. Captain Harper nodded, her heart racing. "It's something we don't know what it is yet, but it could be the key to our survival." The group approached cautiously. The door creaked and groaned as they tried to open it further. It had been centuries, maybe longer, since anyone had touched it. But eventually, with a combined effort, the door gave way, revealing a narrow passage leading deeper into the planet. As they stepped inside, their eyes struggled to adjust to the dim light, but they could make out faint markings along the walls, alien symbols and designs, unlike anything they had ever seen. This was built by someone. Captain Harper muttered, her eyes scanning the structure. "But who? We need to know what's inside," Lieutenant Carl said. "If it's something that can help us, we have to find it." The passage was long and winding, filled with strange technology that hummed and buzzed with an unknown energy. At the end of the tunnel, they came to a massive chamber. The room was filled with advanced machinery and glowing panels, none of which made any sense to the humans. But most startling discovery was a large crystalline structure at the center of the room. The crystal pulsated with a soft, rhythmic glow, as if it were alive. Captain Harper approached it cautiously, her hands trembling as she touched the surface. The moment her fingers brushed the crystal, a jolt of energy surged through her. She staggered back, gasping as a wave of images and sensations flooded her mind. Flashing lights, alien landscapes, strange technologies. It was as if the crystal was showing her a vision of the past, of the beings who had created this structure. "What is this?" Lieutenant Carl whispered, stepping closer. "It's a power source," Captain Harper said, struggling to form the words. "But more than that, it's a link, a connection. This is their technology, but it's alive." The crystal humbled, and suddenly a holographic image flickered to life in front of them. It showed an alien civilization, advanced beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed. They were standing before a massive starship preparing to leave their planet. As the image played, the humans realized something startling. This civilization had been wiped out, leaving only their technology behind. Not the first to be exiled here, Captain Harper said softly. But whoever they were, they didn't survive. They left this place as a warning or a gift. As the team continued to explore the chamber, they realized that the technology within it could change everything. This was not just a place for survival, it was a treasure trove of knowledge, and it could help the humans fight back. They weren't just exiled to die. They were exiled to something greater. This planet held secrets, and those secrets could make humanity stronger than ever. The struggle to survive had only just begun, but with this discovery, the humans knew one thing for certain: they wouldn't just survive here, they would thrive. And the galaxy would soon learn that humanity's greatest strength was not just in surviving the odds, but in turning adversity into opportunity. Awakening the past. As the days passed, the humans grew increasingly fascinated by the mysterious structure they had uncovered. It was unlike anything they had seen before, not just in terms of its technology, but in its sheer scale. The massive underground chamber contained advanced machinery that hummed with a strange energy, yet it had been abandoned for millennia. Despite the danger, the humans couldn't help but feel a deep sense of awe. Captain Harper, as determined as ever, continued to lead the team, now more motivated than ever to understand the hidden power they had discovered. The more they studied the crystal and the technology around it, the more they realized that this was no ordinary place. This ancient structure had been designed to preserve knowledge and perhaps even life itself beyond the reach of time. "We need to unlock everything this place has to offer," Captain Harper said as she carefully examined the central crystal. "We might be able to use it to our advantage." The team worked tirelessly day and night. Lieutenant Carl, with his technical knowledge, was the first to make a breakthrough. The holographic images that had appeared when they first touched the crystal were no longer random flashes. They now displayed coherent scenes. A once proud civilization thriving in a place very much like the humans' new home. This civilization had been far ahead of anything humanity had accomplished, but there was something tragic about their story. These aliens, they were builders, explorers, innovators, Carl said, watching the images flicker. But they were wiped out not by war, but by something else, something unknown. "Do you think it's connected to why they left this behind?" Captain Harper asked, narrowing her eyes. Carl hesitated, then nodded. "I think it is. This wasn't just a retreat. It was a sanctuary. This technology was meant to protect them, maybe even preserve them for a future time." Suddenly, the air in the chamber seemed to grow thick with an unseen presence. The crystal pulsed faster as though responding to their presence. A low hum filled the room, vibrating the air around them. As the team looked at each other, a thought passed through their minds. Had they awakened something that was meant to stay dormant? Before anyone could voice their concerns, the crystal flared brightly, and the walls of the chamber seemed to ripple. A deep voice, unintelligible at first, echoed through the room surrounding them. It was unlike anything they have heard before, alien, but strangely familiar. Captain Carl said, his voice trembling. It's talking to us." The voice in the chamber slowly began to take form, a series of holographic symbols flashing across the walls. Captain Harper's heart pounded in her chest. As she studied them, she recognized a few symbols, patterns of light that resembled the ones they had seen on the walls of the structure when they first entered. This is their language, the one used by the civilization that built this place," Captain Harper muttered, reaching for her translator device. "But what are they saying?" The symbols shifted again, the language, not just words, but images, feelings, and impressions. Each flash seemed to carry more weight than the last. There was a sense of urgency to it now, a warning. "It's showing us something," Lieutenant Carl said, his eyes wide. "It's telling us what happened." Then the holographic projection grew clearer, revealing an image of the alien civilization in its prime. Massive cities glittered under the light of distant stars, their people strange ethereal beings walking among technology far beyond human understanding. But in the blink of an eye, the scene shifted. The people were no longer thriving. Instead, chaos reigned. A vast, shadowy entity had descended from the stars, engulfing everything in its path. It wasn't a weapon, but something much worse, a darkness, a force that consumed everything, erasing life and hope from the universe. They weren't just wiped out by war. Captain Harper whispered it was something far darker, something that could destroy even the strongest civilizations. The hologram flickered, and suddenly a new image emerged. It was a map showing the galaxy with pinpoint locations flashing across the screen. The map seemed to be highlighting several systems, including Earth's, but what stood out the most was one particular symbol near the farthest reaches of space, the human new home. The map, Carl said, his voice filled with realization. It's pointing here. This planet was their last hope, Captain. Harper felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't just a place to survive, it was a refuge, a safe haven from the forest that had wiped out this ancient civilization. But why had the aliens left such a place abandoned for so long? What had caused them to stop using it? And why had humanity been brought here? This planet wasn't meant for us to just survive, Captain Harper said, taking the deep breath. It's meant to be a fortress, a sanctuary against something much greater than anything we've ever faced. The crystal pulsed again, and a new series of images appeared this time. They were not of a peaceful civilization, but of a final desperate stand. The people had fought back against the encroaching darkness using the very same technology the humans now stood before, but it had been too late. The entity was unstoppable. Is this a warning? Carl asked, his voice barely a whisper. Are we supposed to fight it? Captain Harper's mind raced as she looked at the map again. The galaxy was vast, but the danger was closer than she had ever imagined. The threat was not just some far-off enemy, but something that had followed them to this very planet. And they were not alone. Yes, she said slowly, her resolve hardening. It's a warning, and it's not just telling us about the past, it's telling us what's coming. The darkness is out there, and it's coming for us. The humans have been cast out, exile, but now they knew the truth. They weren't just abandoned, they were chosen. This planet was more than a prison. It was the last bastion of hope for a universe that had already forgotten how to fight. The time for survival was over. The time for action was just beginning. The humans weren't just surviving on this planet. They were meant to rise, to awaken the legacy left behind, and to fight back against the darkness that had destroyed the galaxy's greatest civilizations. And this time, they wouldn't just survive, they would conquer. The unseen enemy, the discovery of the ancient technology, had shaken the humans to their core, but it also sparked a renewed sense of purpose. No longer just survivors of a galaxy that had cast them aside, they were now the guardians of a forgotten legacy, a legacy that could potentially save them and perhaps the entire galaxy. Yet even as the team delved deeper into the mysteries of the abandoned sanctuary, a silent dread began to settle over them. The dark forest they had seen in the holograms was no longer some distant specter. It was a very real threat for Captain Harper. The weight of this new responsibility pressed heavily on her. She sat alone in the command center, staring at the map they had uncovered, now projected in the center of the room. The flashing points of light represented more than just location. They were countdowns to an inevitable confrontation. The map wasn't just showing the galaxy as it was, but how it had been transformed by the encroaching darkness. The once thriving planets and civilizations that had been reduced to ruins now stood as silent witnesses to the unstoppable force. Harper's thoughts were interrupted when Lieutenant Carl entered the room, his face pale. He was holding a small device in his hand, the same device they had used to analyze the crystal energy signatures. "Captain, you need to see this," Carl said, his voice tight with urgency. Harper stood and followed him to the console. Carl plugged in the device, and a new image flickered onto the screen, a video feed of the planet's surface. But this time it was different. The feed wasn't showing their base or the surrounding areas they had explored. It was zooming in on something deep beneath the surface, something that had been undetected until now. The ground trembled slightly as if something enormous was moving beneath the crust. Then the video shifted and the camera focused on an enormous cavern, a vast chasm stretching far into the planet's depths, and in the center of that chasm an ancient machine glowing faintly with the same energy as the crystal sat dormant. "This," Carl said, his voice barely a whisper, "this is the source of it all." Harper leaned in, her heart racing. "What is it?" "It's a weapon," Carl said, eyes wide with realization. "The aliens, this civilization, they built it to protect themselves. But it's more than just a weapon, it's a key to something. Even greater, they locked it away. But now it's been awakened, the darkness is coming. And this machine is our only hope to stop it." The word sent a chill through Harper. It was as if the very air around them had grown colder. The threat they had seen in the holograms, the force that had wiped out an entire civilization, wasn't just an abstract concept anymore, it was real. And it was coming for them. "Is it too late?" she asked, her voice steady, but laced with fear. Carl hesitated, staring at the screen. "We don't know. But if we don't stop it, if we don't unlock the full power of this machine, then the darkness will spread." "It's already here." Captain Harper stood motionless, her mind racing. She thought of the people she had left behind, her crew, her soldiers, her fellow humans, who had been exiled from the very galaxy they once called home. They had fought to survive, but now survival wasn't enough. Now they had to fight for their very future. "Prepare a team," she said, her voice firm. "We're going down there. It's time we took control of this weapon." Carl nodded. Immediately turning to gather the necessary equipment, Harper turned back to the map, her thoughts already moving. Ahead, the machine beneath the surface was more than just a weapon. It was the last hope for the galaxy, and she knew that they had no choice but to fight. There was no other option. The darkness that had consumed the galaxy's greatest civilizations would not stop until it had wiped out everything in its path. As the team prepared for the perilous journey to the heart of the planet's core, Captain Harper reflected on the strange sense of destiny that had led them here. It was almost as if they had been chosen, not just to survive, but to rise. This planet, once thought to be their prison, was now their battleground, a place where they would reclaim their future and fight back against the forces that had nearly destroyed everything. As they descended into the chasm, the air grew thick with tension. The walls of the cavern were lined with strange markings, more symbols of a long-lost language. The deeper they went, the more intense the hum of energy became. It was as if the very planet was alive, its veins pulsating with power. When they finally reached the chamber where the machine lay dormant, it was even more massive than they had imagined. Its surface was covered in strange alien inscriptions. But it was clear that it was not just a weapon. It was the system, a network that extended deep into the planet's core. The humans were not just here to turn it on. They had to understand it, unlock its secrets, and then only then could they use it to stop the encroaching darkness. Captain Harper stood before the machine, her heart pounding. She had faced countless battles in her career, but this was different. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for everything. The fate of the entire galaxy rested on their shoulders. "Leighton, get to work," she said, her voice unwavering. The humans weren't just fighting for their survival anymore. They were fighting to reclaim their place in the universe, to prove that they were more than just a species cast aside. They were a force to be reckoned with, and they would stop at nothing to ensure that the darkness would never conquer them. As they prepared to activate the ancient machine, Captain Harper could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. The choices they made here would determine the fate of the galaxy, and she wasn't about to let the darkness win. Not without a fight. The awakening, the silence of the chamber was deafening as the humans surrounded the massive machine. Every heartbeat echoed like a drum in the cold air, each sound underscored by the faint hum of energy pulsating from the ancient device. Captain Harper stood at the forefront, staring at the intricate control panels, the glowing symbols and patterns on the machine surface. They had traveled so far, faced so many dangers to get here, and now the final moment had arrived. "Are we ready?" Harper asked, her voice steady, but laced with an undeniable tension. Lieutenant Carl, who had been working alongside the scientists to decode the alien symbols, nodded. His face was set in grim determination. "We don't have much time, Captain. The energy readings are off the charts. If this goes wrong—" "I know," Harper interrupted, her gaze never leaving the machine, "but we have no other choice. If we don't succeed here, everything we fought for will be for nothing. The darkness will consume us all." The air crackled with the weight of their decision. Everyone knew that failure was not an option. The machine had to be activated, but its purpose remained a mystery. Could it truly be the weapon they needed, or would it awaken something far more dangerous? Harper stepped forward, and placed her hand on the console. The touch sent a ripple of energy through the chamber, causing the ancient device to stir. A low growl reverberated from deep within the core like the growl of a beast long asleep. The walls trembled slightly, and the ground beneath them seemed to pulse with life. Carl quickly joined Harper at the controls, his eyes scanning the interface. "There's a power surge," he said, his voice filled with both awe and fear. "It's coming online suddenly." The entire chamber filled with a blinding blue light. The team shielded their eyes, their hearts racing as the light grew more intense. For a moment, it felt as though the very air itself was being ripped apart. Then, as quickly as it had started, the light faded, leaving behind an eerie stillness. They stood in the dark, their breath coming out in shallow outcasts. The machine was alive. A series of low mechanical clicks echoed around the chamber as the machine began to shift, its massive components moving and groaning as though awakening from a long slumber. The walls surrounding them began to glow, revealing new symbols that had not been visible before. It was as though the machine was communicating with the planet itself, sensing with its very heartbeat. "Is it working?" one of the engineers asked, her voice tentative. "We're about to find out," Harper said, her gaze never leaving the machine. The pulse of energy was unmistakable now. It was like the machine was feeding on the very core of the planet, tapping into something ancient and powerful. Without warning, the ground beneath them shook violently. Everyone stumbled, their hands reaching for support as the chamber seemed to come alive. From the center of the machine, a beam of light shot upward, splitting the ceiling open like a wound. The energy was overwhelming. It wasn't just power, it was raw, unfiltered force. "Something older than the stars themselves." "Get to cover," Harper shouted. "This thing is unstable." But it was too late. The beam of light expanded outward, consuming the entire chamber in a pulse of searing energy. For a moment, everything went white, and then nothing. When the light faded, the team found themselves outside the machine's chamber, staring at the newly transformed landscape. The ground had cracked open, exposing deep fiery chasms that pulsed with energy. The sky above had shifted from its dark, oppressive hue to an almost unnatural shade of red. It felt as if the very atmosphere had changed. "Where are we?" Lieutenant Carl asked, his voice thick with disbelief. Harper looked around, her pulse quickening. This wasn't the planet they had arrived on. The familiar landmarks had vanished, replaced by a chaotic, surreal landscape. The machine hadn't just powered up, it had transported them somewhere else, somewhere unknown. "We're still on the same planet," Harper replied, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. "But this isn't the world we knew. Something has changed. The machine, whatever it is, has altered reality itself." The team looked at each other, confusion and fear written across their faces. What had they unleashed? "Are we still in control?" one of the engineers asked, his voice trembling. Harper's mind raced as she tried to make sense of their new reality. They had come here to stop the darkness, to wield the power of the ancient machine, but now they had no idea what they had actually awakened. Had they set in motion a series of events that would save them or destroy everything they had fought for? Just then, a strange sound filled the air, a low, rumbling noise that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The ground beneath them began to tremble again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the machine powering up, it wasn't the planet shifting. This was the sound of something moving, something massive. Suddenly a figure appeared in the distance. It was cloaked in shadows, its silhouette enormous and indistinct. It moved with a strange grace, covering vast distances. With every step, the air around it seemed to warp, as if the figure itself was bending reality. Harper squinted, trying to make out what it was, but the figure was too far away, and the red sky distorted her vision. There was no doubt, though, it was coming toward them. "What is that?" Carl asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," Harper replied, gripping her weapon tighter, "but whatever it is, we're not ready for it." The team's nerves were on edge as they prepared for whatever was coming. They had thought the machine was the key to their survival, but now it seemed they had triggered something far greater than they could have imagined, and it was coming for them. The first encounter, the figure that approached them from the horizon, seemed to pulse with energy, its movements sending ripples through the very air. It wasn't just large, it was immense, towering above them, like some ancient god come to life. As it neared the ground beneath its feet, trembled as though the world itself recognized its presence. Harper felt a chill crawl down her spine. This wasn't a creature, this was something far older, far more powerful, a force of nature. The team tensed, weapons raised, but Harper held up a hand to stop them. "Don't shoot," she ordered. "We don't even know what that is yet." The figure finally stopped. Standing at the edge of the newly formed chasm for a moment, there was silence. Utter, suffocating silence. It felt as if the very air had thickened, as if time itself had paused in anticipation. Then a voice rang out, not from any visible mouth, but from deep within their minds. It was a voice unlike any human voice, yet it echoed with a strange familiarity, as if it had always been there waiting to be heard. "You dare to awaken me." The voice was powerful yet cold. It reverberated through the core of their beings, shaking them to the core. "What foolishness has brought you here?" Harper's mind raced. This was no ordinary being. It was not alien, nor was it human. It was something far older, something that had been lying dormant for aeons. The machine had awakened this entity. "Whatever it was, we didn't know what we were doing," Harper replied, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "We came seeking a way to fight the darkness that's consuming our world. We thought this machine could help us." The figure seemed to laugh, though it wasn't a sound any human could produce. It was a low rumbling noise that felt as if the ground itself were laughing at them. "You seek to fight the dark, you seek to conquer what has always been. Foolish children, the darkness you fear is but a shadow compared to what lies within me." Harper's heart pounded in her chest. The entity was no ally. They hadn't unleashed salvation. They had opened a door to something far more dangerous. "What are you?" Carl finally asked, his voice shaking. The figure shifted, its form rippling like liquid light, and for the first time the team saw its face, or at least what passed for one. It was not human or anything they could comprehend. It was a face made of shifting shadows, eyes that seemed to glow with an internal fire, and a mouth that appeared to be made of the very fabric of space itself. "I am the guardian of this world," the voice replied. "I was created to ensure that no mortal species could ever wield the power you've just awakened. I have watched over this planet for count ages, ensuring that it remained sealed away from the grasp of those who would misuse it. But now you have broken that seal." Harper's mind raced as she tried to think of a way out of this. The team had no way of fighting this being. It wasn't a soldier, nor was it a fleet of ships they could take down with force. This entity was the power itself. They had unknowingly triggered an ancient mechanism that had been designed to prevent anyone from accessing the machine's full potential. "We didn't mean to break anything," Harper said, trying to calm the situation. "We only wanted to survive. We didn't know we were waking you." The faker's eyes narrowed, and the air around them grew colder. "Survival. You seek survival when you've awakened a power far beyond your comprehension. You think you can control this force. You aren't not worthy." With a single movement, the entity extended its arm, and the very earth trembled beneath its power. The ground cracked open, sending jagged stones into the air, and the sky above them began to warp and twist, as if the fabric of reality itself were being torn apart. Harper and the others were thrown back by the force of the being's power. They scrambled to regain their footing, their minds racing to comprehend what was happening. The world around them was breaking down. The energy they had unleashed was starting to tear the planet apart. "Captain," Carl shouted, "we can't fight this. We need to get out of here." Harper's eyes widened as she saw what was happening. The being wasn't just attacking them, it was breaking apart the planet itself. The very foundations of the world were crumbling beneath their feet. The energy from the machine was too much, and the entity had begun to unravel everything around them. "We need to stop this before it's too late," Harper said, her voice urgent. "We got to get back to the machine. It's the only way to reverse this." But as she turned toward the machine, she realized something terrifying. The machine was no longer where they had left it. It had vanished. "Where did it go?" one of the engineers asked, his voice filled with panic. "It doesn't matter," Harper replied, her voice steely with resolve. "We have to find it. If we don't, we're all dead." As the team scrambled to make sense of the chaos unfolding around them, the entity's voice echoed once again, louder this time, as though it were coming from every direction. "You cannot stop what has been set in motion," it boomed. "This world is mine, and it will remain mine. Your existence means nothing in the face of what is to come. Harper gritted her teeth. She had no choice. Now they had to find a way to control the machine, or this entire planet, perhaps the entire galaxy, would be destroyed. "Who will not give up," she said firmly. "Not now, not ever." The figure let out a low chuckle, its eyes glowing brighter. "Then you will learn what true power is, and what it costs." The team moved forward despite the growing sense of hopelessness surrounding them. They had awakened an ancient power, and now they were locked in a struggle for survival. The stakes had never been higher, and the enemy they faced was beyond anything they had ever imagined. But there was one thing they knew for sure: they were not going down without a fight. The final stand. Harper's heart pounded as the ground beneath her trembled. The sky, swirling in chaotic waves, the world around her was falling apart literally. The planet's core was destabilizing, reacting to the overwhelming energy unleashed by the ancient being. The ground cracked open, and the landscape itself seemed to warp in response to the figure's power. She glanced at her team, each face filled with fear, but also a determination she knew couldn't be shattered. They had no weapons strong enough to fight this being, no plans to survive this, and yet they still moved forward. They had been exiled from their home, but they weren't going to let that exile define them. They weren't going to let this alien god be the end of their story. "Stay close," Harper shouted, rallying the team. "We find that machine, or we're done." For the entity's voice Moon began, as if laughing at their resolve. "You cannot escape what has already been set in motion. The very fabric of this world is being undone, and you think you can stop it." Harper ignored the voice, keeping her eyes on the horizon. She had no time for speeches. They had to act fast. They moved through the cracked, broken terrain, each step more treacherous than the last. As they neared the ruins of what had once been a great city, Harper's mind raced. The machine was supposed to have been their savior, but it was gone. Had it been moved? Had it been taken by the entity? And then something caught her eye, a faint glow beneath the rubble, a pulse of energy. She motioned for the team to stop and made her way to the source. There, buried beneath the debris, was the machine, but it wasn't the same. It was glowing with an intense light, far brighter than before. It hummed with a new energy, an energy that pulsed in rhythm with the entity itself. The machine had absorbed the power of the Guardian, and now it was both their last hope and their greatest threat. "This is it," Harper muttered, kneeling before it. "We have to activate it. We need to control this power." But as she reached out to touch the machine, a cold laugh echoed through the air. "You think you can control it? You are nothing compared to me," the entity said, its voice shaking the earth. "This power is mine. You cannot wield what you do not understand." Harper clenched her fists. She had no choice. She had to try. The machine had to be the key to undoing the destruction, or it would all perish. "Activate the sequence," she commanded, her voice firm. Despite the fear gnawing at her, the engineers worked quickly, fingers flying over the controls. As the energy from the machine began to rise, the ground beneath them trembled violently, as if the planet itself was resisting their actions. The air became thick, and the sky above them seemed to crack and thunder. And then, just as the machine hummed to life, the Guardian appeared before them, once again blocking their path. "You cannot win," it boomed, its presence consuming the very space around them. "You are ants struggling against a storm. You cannot control what was never meant for your kind." Harper didn't flinch. "We don't need to control it," she said, eyes locked onto the machine. "We just need to survive." With a final press of the button, the machine's energy surged forward in a pulse of blinding light. The earth itself seemed to groan as the energy clashed with the entity's power. For a moment, everything went silent. The air was thick, charged with an immense force that seemed to stretch the fabric of reality itself. Then the blast hit. The ground shook violently as the power of the machine collided with the Guardian's energy. The brilliant explosion of light and sound erupted around them, so intense that it momentarily blinded them all. Harper's ears rang with the sound of thunder, and for a brief second, she thought she might be grown into another dimension altogether. But when the light faded and the dust settled, the world was eerily still. Harper slowly opened her eyes. The entity was gone. The ground was cracked. The sky was darkened. But the world had stopped crumbling. They had done it. Against all odds, they had survived. But the victory didn't feel sweet. The destruction around them was far from over the planet, was still unstable, its core still in danger. The machine might have stopped the Guardian, but it hadn't healed the world, not yet. "We won the battle," Harper said, looking at her team, "but the war is far from over." Carl stepped forward, his face grim. "We don't even know what we've just unleashed. What if there are more of those things?" Harper nodded, her mind already racing to the next step. "We'll figure it out. We'll survive. We have to." The humans have been exiled, cast out into the vast unknown. But now they had proven something to themselves and to the galaxy. They were no longer weak, no longer powerless. They were survivors, and they would conquer this world and any world that tried to break them.